Hello everyone. Have a nice evening. Enjoy the good ghost story with the sound of light rain from BLACKRIDGE Stories, and have a good night's sleep. Welcome to the first dark and tense story. Haunted City. She was only 2 blocks from home when she noticed the blinking high beams behind her. It started like most nights in the city, busy, loud, and soaked in neon. Lisa had stayed late at the hospital again. Her residency shift had dragged on until past midnight, and by the time she finally pulled into the gas station on 43rd Street, she was dead on her feet. She grabbed a coffee, a snack, and yawned all the way back to her car. As she opened the door and slid into the driver's seat, she thought she heard something behind her, a creak or shuffle. But when she turned, there was nothing there, just the shadows in the back seat, deep and dark. Lisa locked the doors out of habit, started the engine, and began driving home. That's when she saw them, headlights in her rearview mirror, a black SUV. It wasn't unusual, this was New York, but what was odd was how closely it followed her. It didn't matter if she sped up or slowed down. The SUV stuck behind her like glue. Then it happened. The SUV blinked its high beams once, twice. Then again. Lisa furrowed her brow, changed lanes. The SUV did the same. The high beams flashed again. Her pulse quickened. When she turned down her street, a quiet row of brownstones tucked away from the main road. The SUV followed. Now the high beams weren't just blinking. They were blinding. She pulled into her driveway. The SUV skidded in behind her, lights flashing furiously. Lisa threw her car into park and jumped out furious. "What the hell is your problem?" she shouted. A tall man burst out of the SUV, hands raised. "Ma'am, please listen to me. There's someone in your car." At first, she didn't believe him. The adrenaline, the fear, it all blurred together. But then she turned around. Her backseat door creaked open. A man, grimy, wild-eyed, clutching a rusted box cutter, crawled out and made a run for it into the darkness. Lisa screamed. The SUV driver lunged after the intruder, but lost him in the alley. The cops came. They searched the area, found nothing. They dusted for prints, asked Lisa 100 questions. She only remembered the man's eyes in the mirror. They'd been watching her since the gas station. Turns out, the man was a transient, possibly schizophrenic, who had a habit of sneaking into unlocked cars and hiding in the back seat. He'd been arrested before. Once, he'd even attacked a woman when she stopped at a red light. Lisa never left her doors unlocked again. But that's not the end. 3 nights later, she found something under her passenger seat. A note written on a wrinkled paper napkin. It read, "You should have let me ride home. I wasn't finished." There were no fingerprints, no DNA, no signs of forced entry. She moved out of the city within the month. Welcome to the second dark and tense story, the haunted house. It was cheap, quiet, and came fully furnished. Too good to be true. And it was. Rachel didn't believe in ghosts. She believed in rent prices, student loans, and Craigslist. So when she found a fully furnished 1-bedroom apartment in an old Victorian house for only $600 a month, she jumped on it like a lifeline. It was in a quiet neighborhood in Providence, Rhode Island. The landlord, Mrs. Bellamy, was an elderly woman who lived downstairs and did most of the upkeep herself. "You're lucky," she said with a knowing smile. "People don't stay long, but maybe you will." The apartment had charm. Stained glass windows, antique furniture, even a grandfather clock that still worked. Rachel didn't ask why it was so cheap. She didn't want to know. The first few days were uneventful, peaceful even. But that changed the first night. She forgot to lock her bedroom door. Around 3:13 a.m., she woke up to the sound of the grandfather clock chiming downstairs. But she hadn't wound it. Then came the footsteps. Slow, deliberate, creaking up the staircase. Rachel froze in bed, heart pounding. The steps stopped just outside her room. She stared at the doorknob. Nothing happened. The next morning, she told herself it was a dream. Old houses make sounds. It was the wind. But she locked her door that night, just in case. And that's when scratching started. Not loud, just a soft, rhythmic scrape against the wood, as if someone or something was trying to peel the paint from the door with their fingernails. Rachel didn't sleep that night. She tried asking Mrs. Bellamy about it, but the old woman just chuckled. "Oh dear," she said, stirring her tea. "That room has memories." Rachel started noticing other things. Her phone alarm going off at 3:13 a.m., even when it was turned off. Her toothbrush wet before she used it. The light in the hallway flickering exactly 7 times before staying off. One night, she walked past a mirror in the hallway and thought she saw someone standing behind her. A tall, gaunt man with hollow eyes. But when she turned around, there was no one there. She tried to leave, packed her things, called for a ride. But when the car arrived, the driver looked at the house and immediately backed away. "I don't pick up from here," he said, and drove off. Rachel stayed one more night. She had no choice. But this time, she set up her phone to record video while she slept, just to prove she wasn't losing her mind. She locked the bedroom door, put a chair against it, then went to bed. At 3:13 a.m., she woke to the sound of the chair sliding slowly across the floor. The doorknob turned. The lock clicked open. She couldn't move, couldn't scream. Sleep paralysis, she told herself. Had to be. The door creaked open. From the corner of her eye, she saw a figure step inside. Tall, shadowed. It stood by the bed and leaned down close to her face. She smelled rot, dust, something old. Then it whispered, "I used to sleep here too." She passed out. When she woke up, it was morning. The door was closed. The chair was back in place. But her phone was gone. She found it in the bathtub, screen shattered. The last video was corrupted, except for the final frame. It showed her asleep, and a hand long gray, with too many joints, reaching for her face. She left that day. Didn't even take her clothes. Mrs. Bellamy didn't seem surprised. "Room will be ready again soon," she said, sipping her tea. And that grandfather clock, it still chimes at 3:13. Even when no one lives upstairs. Welcome to the dark and tense third story. Serial killer. Every summer, someone disappears. But this year, we brought a camera. It was supposed to be the last great summer. College was over, and real life was waiting. But before they all scattered, they wanted one final trip, just like old times. So 5 friends, Jess, Nate, Rhea, Mark, and Lila, drove up to Birch Lake, a quiet campground tucked deep in the Vermont woods. But Birch Lake had a reputation. There was a local legend about a man named Clarence Wade. He'd lived in a cabin on the far side of the lake years ago. Rumor had it he went insane after his family died in a fire. They said he wandered the woods at night, wearing a burlap sack over his face, carrying a butcher's hook. They called him the Birch Lake Killer. Every few years, someone disappeared. A camper, a hiker. No body, no trace. Just blood by the shoreline and whispers in the dark. The 5 of them laughed it off. The first night was perfect. Bonfire, cheap beer, stars overhead. Jess even brought her old camcorder. "Let's document the final summer," she said, recording everything. But at 2:14 a.m., the camera caught something strange. While they were all asleep, the tent flap moved. Just slightly. The next morning, Nate's boots were missing, and Mark swore he heard something walking around the tent in the middle of the night. "Probably a raccoon," Rhea muttered, brushing her teeth. But the next night, Mark didn't come back from the woods. He'd said he was going to pee. 5 minutes. That was it. 30 minutes passed. Then an hour. Then they found his flashlight in the dirt, still on. Lens cracked, smeared with something dark. They called his name, searched the woods, but no response. The nearest ranger station was 45 minutes away, and no one wanted to split up. At 4:30 a.m., they heard screaming. Hi, male, muffled, coming from across the lake. They tried to leave that morning, but their car tires had been slashed. All 4. The keys were still in the glove compartment. That's when they knew. Someone was hunting them. Rhea wanted to take the trail and hike to the nearest road, but Jess insisted they stay together and hole up in the cabin across the lake, the one Clarence Wade had supposedly lived in. "It's the only shelter," Jess said, "and it's on higher ground." They paddled across the lake, using the old rowboat they found near the dock. The cabin looked abandoned, boarded up, but the boards had been pried loose. Inside, it smelled of wet wood and old meat. They found crude drawings scratched into the walls. Hooks, fires, eyes. Then they found Mark, or what was left of him. He was hanging from the rafters, upside down, his skin peeled in strips like bark from a tree. Rhea vomited. Nate lost it and ran. They never saw him again. Jess locked the cabin door and pushed the dresser in front of it. She had her camcorder. She whispered into it. "If anyone finds this, we're at Birch Lake. Someone is out here. He's killing us. Please don't come looking." Lila was catatonic, staring at the corner of the room. "He's not a story," she kept saying. "He's real. He watches from the trees." That night, the killer came. They heard him dragging something metal along the ground. Clink, scrape, clink, getting closer. Then silence. Jess held her breath. The camcorder caught everything. The door creaked open slowly, impossibly, and a tall figure stepped inside. He wore a rotting flannel shirt, stained with blood, and a burlap sack over his head. One eye hole was torn too wide, revealing a bulging, bloodshot eye. In his hand was a rusted hook. He didn't rush. He didn't speak. He just walked toward Lila and drove the hook through her chest in one motion. Jess ran. She didn't know where she was going, just out away, through the trees. She tripped, fell, rolled down the slope into the lake, and when she turned back, she saw him standing on the shore, just watching. When she was found 2 days later by a group of hikers, she was delirious, babbling about burlap and hooks. The cops searched the woods. They found the cabin, the blood, the remains, but no sign of Clarence Wade. No hook, no sack, just the camcorder, half submerged in the lake, still recording. Welcome to dark, intense story number 4. Supernatural creatures. It doesn't hunt you for food. It hunts for what you know. Deep in the Black Pine National Forest, beyond the marked trails and ranger outposts, lies a valley locals call Dead Man's Hollow. No birds, no game. Even the wind seems to avoid it. Elias Hart, a wildlife photographer known for chasing legends, wasn't superstitious. He had spent nights in snake-infested deserts, watched wolves devour elk from just feet away. But the story of the hollow-eyed one drew him, and like nothing else. The locals in the nearby town of Rosethorn refused to talk much, but Elias managed to get an old hunter named Travis drunk enough to spill. "You ever feel something looking through you?" Travis whispered. "Not at you, through you. Like it's digging around in your head. That's what it does. The hollow-eyed one. Ain't got no face, just holes. Like burned-out eyes and wet wood. And it don't kill for meat. It kills for secrets." Elias thought it was perfect. A myth to debunk. A new project to film. Proof, or proof of hoax. He packed up 3 trail cams, 2 days of rations, and a drone. Alone, of course. He didn't want any crew spooking the shot. The forest grew darker as he went deeper. Trees leaned in like whispering men. Moss blanketed everything, muting his steps. No animals, no insects, just the sound of his breath. By the second night, he reached the hollow. It was a basin choked in fog. The air was heavier there, as if time itself moved slower. But in the middle of it was a tree, tall, skeletal, with blackened bark. It looked charred, but felt cold to the touch, like stone. He set his cameras around the clearing, facing outward, motion sensors on, infrared on. Then he pitched camp at the edge. At 2:08 a.m., first camera buzzed. Movement, 30 yards east. Elias grabbed his thermal scope. There was nothing. No weight. The fog moved unnaturally, parted like something walked through it. But he saw no legs, no shape. Then came the sound. Not a growl, not a scream. A whisper. Dozens of voices layered atop each other, whispering in different tones, different languages, all incomprehensible. It circled the clearing, brushing just past the cameras, never quite touching the lens. Elias pressed record on his handheld cam. He couldn't see it, but the hairs on his arm stood up, like it was already watching him. Then the second motion detector lit up. Something had passed behind him, back toward the tree. He turned slowly and saw it. A tall, emaciated figure stood at the base of the burned tree. It had no mouth, no nose. Its face was stretched tight like wet paper, but where the eyes should have been, there were two gaping holes, deep and writhing. And somehow, Elias felt it looking into him. His thoughts unraveled like string. He remembered things he'd forgotten. The day his father left, the first lie he ever told, the moment he'd almost let his younger brother drown in a pool at age 10 and didn't tell anyone. The hollow-eyed one fed on it, drank it. Elias dropped the camera and ran. But the forest changed. The trees folded in on themselves, rearranging, closing paths. Time fractured. He heard his own voice behind him, calling out, "Don't go this way." He ran until his lungs burned, until the whispers stopped. When he came to, it was morning. Fog gone, sky clear. All his equipment was still there. Batteries drained. Memory cards wiped clean, except for one, which contained only a single video. It was a recording of himself sleeping, and above his body, the hollow-eyed one stood motionless, watching. It stayed there for 3 hours. Didn't move, didn't breathe, just stared. Elias left the forest that day. He didn't speak about it, but he stopped filming, stopped going outdoors, and 3 months later, he was found dead in his apartment. No wounds, no struggle, just empty. His friends said it looked like someone had scooped the light out of him. The police found one thing on his desk, a post-it note with 5 words, scrawled in shaky handwriting. It knows what you know. Welcome to the dark and tense story number 5. Cursed land. You don't dig here. You don't build. And for God's sake, you don't stay after dark. Somewhere along Route 17 in West Virginia, past the shuttered gas stations and rusted mailboxes, there's a road that doesn't appear on any GPS. It's called Briar Lane, a one-lane gravel path shrouded by drooping trees and wet moss. At the end of that road sits a forgotten valley the locals call BLACKRIDGE Hollow. No one lives there. Not anymore. The land was once owned by a preacher named Elias Greaves in the late 1800s. He founded a small commune there, 30 souls who wanted to separate from the corrupt world. They lived off the land, prayed day and night, and never left. Then one spring, something changed. The crops died. Livestock vanished. The people began digging, frantic, wild, claiming they heard the roots speak. One by one, they tore up the ground with their bare hands, whispering in tongues, eyes blank and bleeding. No one saw them again. The only thing left behind was the church, rotted, sunken into the earth, and a crude sign nailed to the tree at the entrance. The root remembers. Over the years, people stayed away, but that didn't stop the curious. In 1994, a real estate developer named Thomas Dreyer bought the land cheap, thinking he could flip it into a rustic getaway resort. He brought a crew of 6, loggers, surveyors, engineers. No locals, of course. They refused to even drive near Briar Lane. Day 1 went fine. They marked the trees, set up camp. Day 2, they hit something. Not rock, not metal, wood, deep underground. A large, circular lid, like a hatch, made of gnarled, blackened wood. It was cold to the touch, vibrating softly, like it was humming beneath the soil. They unearthed it fully by nightfall, and Thomas made the worst decision of his life. He opened it. Beneath was a shaft. Not man-made, not natural. The walls were lined with tangled roots, twisted like veins. And the smell wasn't rot. It was memory, like walking into a room that remembered every scream ever uttered inside it. That night, they heard the voices, not from the forest, from below, muffled crying, scratching, pleading. One of the crew, Jenna, swore she saw a pale hand reach up from the hole. Long fingers, fingernails like bark. The others thought it was hysteria, until Roy disappeared. His tent was still there, so were his clothes, flashlight, and boots. But the soil around his campsite had been disturbed, clawed at, as if someone had tried to drag him under. Thomas wanted to leave, pack it all up, forget the land, write it off as a tax loss. But the road was gone, literally gone. Where Briar Lane once stretched toward the highway was now an unbroken wall of trees. No tire tracks, no gravel, just untouched forest, like no one had ever been there. They tried walking. Every path curved back. They could see their own tents from a different angle, as if the land folded in on itself. And then the dreams began. Each night, they dreamed of roots wrapping around their limbs, sliding down their throats. The dreams whispered names, not theirs, names they'd never heard before. On the fourth night, Jenna hanged herself with a vine. No one knew where she found it. It wasn't there the day before, but it bled when they cut her down. Thomas stopped sleeping. The rest grew quiet, paranoid. They took turns watching a hole, but it grew bigger each night. By the sixth day, only Thomas and one other crew member remained. And on the seventh morning, Thomas woke up to find the hole had spread all the way to the edge of the camp, and the other man buried up to his neck in roots, still breathing, eyes wide, mouth sealed shut by living vines. The forest whispered, one must remain. Thomas understood. He ran, and this time the road was back. He didn't ask why. He didn't look back. He drove straight to the sheriff's office in Roston, raving like a lunatic. When a search team returned to Blackridge Hollow, there was nothing there. No hole, no tents, no bones, just the church, collapsed in on itself, and a new sign on the same tree. One still remains. Thomas never spoke again. Spent the rest of his life in a psychiatric facility. Died staring at the ceiling, mouth moving like he was praying in reverse. To this day, people report hearing voices near Briar Lane when the fog rolls in. Some claim the trees grow faster there, bending inward like they're listening. And no matter what season it is, the ground is always wet, like something just beneath the surface is still breathing, still waiting. Welcome to the sixth dark and tense story. Spirit of vengeance. Never mock the morning. Some griefs don't stay buried. Dry Creek, Arizona. A small town deep in the desert, where hot winds whistle through creaking porches and sandstorms carry the scent of rust and ash. Everyone here knows one rule: never speak her name after sunset. They only refer to her as the widow. The story dates back to the 19th century, when Dry Creek was still a booming gold rush town. A woman named Eliza Hartley lived there with her husband Jonas, a gentle miner. Eliza was a healer, tending to the town's ailments with herbs and acupuncture. But intelligent women were not welcome in those days, especially not when they knew too much. In 1887, a strange plague swept through. First the children, then the elderly, and soon the healthy. All dropped like flies. Eliza did all she could, but the illness was too swift, too powerful. The townsfolk began to whisper. They said she was the cause, that her remedies were poison, that she had opened the gates of hell with witchcraft. One December night, beneath a cold wind and a full moon, the townspeople came for Eliza. They hung Jonas from a large pine tree in front of their home, accusing him of consorting with demons. Eliza was bound and thrown into a dry well. Just before being cast into the darkness, she uttered one final sentence: "People will die, not because of me, but because of your own sins." 3 days later, the bodies of those who had taken part in the lynching were found, ripped apart and hanging upside down from the same tree where Jonas had died. Their tongues had been cut out, hands twisted backwards, and a strange symbol was drawn in blood across their chests, a circle with a jagged crack down the middle. From then on, panic gripped the town. People reported nightmares of a woman in black, hair covering her face, standing by the well. Whispers floated from the earth, lullabies in a dead language. Anyone foolish enough to say Eliza after dark would vanish. Their bodies were never recovered. Years passed. Dry Creek became a ghost town. Only a few families remained, mostly elderly residents who refused to leave. The tale of the widow became folklore, but everyone remembered, and no one lived near the well, until 2012, when a group of university students from Flagstaff arrived to shoot a documentary. They found Eliza's home, now just a pile of rubble covered in dry cactus, and they found the well. One of the group, Lydia, was a spiritual type, always wearing amber beads and carrying Wicca spell books. As she stood near the well, her watch stopped. The cameras failed. Dust began to swirl, even though the air was still. But the others laughed. One of them, Jeff, climbed onto the well's edge, spat into it, and shouted, "Eliza, if you're still down there, come do something." Immediately, Lydia screamed. Blood poured from her ears. Her eyes rolled white. They thought she was having a seizure. But by the time the ambulance arrived, Lydia was mumbling. She's out now, and she remembers every face. That night, Jeff vanished from the tent. Police later found a camera dropped at the desert's edge. Its final clip showing Jeff being dragged away by a slithering shadow from underground, the sound of claws scraping stone echoing through the night. The two remaining students fled Dry Creek, but death followed them. One burned inside his locked car. The other drowned herself in a bathtub, eyes wide open. Only Lydia survived. She spent years in a psychiatric hospital, silent, until one day someone asked her, "What did you see in that well?" She smiled a twisted, broken grin. "I saw the pain, and now I am part of it." Today, people of Dry Creek have built an iron fence around the well, not to trap her, but to keep others away. Welcome to the dark and tense seventh story, the turn onto Highway 63. Some exits weren't built for the living. 3 a.m. A light rain falls. Headlights sweep across glistening streaks on the wet asphalt. Simon Garvey, a telecommunications engineer, drives down Highway 63 in Missouri after a late meeting. His eyes sting from caffeine. All he wants is a rest stop. He nearly misses the small rusted sign on the roadside. It flashes for only a moment under the headlights. Exit 34, Weaver's Rest. He's never heard of the place. GPS shows nothing, but as sleep begins to blur his vision, Simon turns off the highway. The exit is narrow and rough, as if unused for decades. Vines crawl over a rotted wooden sign. "Welcome to Weaver's Rest, a peaceful place to forget." The town sits nestled among thick woods. There are no streetlights, but faint glows shine from old-fashioned windows. He sees a 1950s-style gas station, a flickering neon diner, and a roadside inn with a painted sign. The Loom Inn. Simon parks and enters the diner to ask for directions. Inside, a silver-haired woman stands behind the counter. Her hair is neatly pinned up, her apron printed with faded flowers. Her gray eyes are clouded like mist. "With this rain, you should stay the night," she says softly, but there's an empty ring in her voice. "We've got rooms at the Loom. Nobody drives on after they've arrived here." Simon chuckles awkwardly, assuming it's just a local hospitality pitch. He checks in. A room upstairs, window facing the woods. But that night he doesn't sleep. Not because of the rain, but because there are no sounds at all. No cars, no insects. Just a faint pulse in the walls, like a heartbeat, but not his. At midnight, he looks out the window and sees a figure standing at the forest's edge, unmoving. When he blinks, it's gone. The next morning, something about the town feels off. The light is a strange gray, as though the sun filters through layers of dust. Townspeople wear old-style clothes. No one carries a phone. When he asks about cell reception, they fall silent. He tries to leave, to find the highway again, but the road is gone. Where he had turned in the night before is now just a dense wall of trees. No tire marks, no sign of a turnoff. The GPS shows no signal. His car's digital clock reads midnight and doesn't move. He returns to the Loom Inn, demanding to check out, but the innkeeper only says, "You came to Weaver's Rest. Now you must choose to remember or forget everything." That evening, he ventures into the woods, toward where he saw the figure the night before. There he finds a crumbling bell tower with a spiral staircase leading underground. In the chamber below, Simon discovers hundreds of old Polaroids, each showing someone else who came before him, standing in the very room of the loom and he now sleeps in. And he finds a photo of himself, taken from the back of his head, dated last night, scrawled on the wall in black charcoal. There is no way out, only the way to forget. Simon collapses. When he wakes, he's back in his room at the inn. The door is locked from the outside. From that moment on, Time stops behaving normally. Each time he wakes, it's a different day. Sometimes morning, sometimes dusk, sometimes during a soundless rain. The townspeople appear older, younger, unfamiliar. Then the next day treat him like an old friend. He tries keeping a journal, but every time he sleeps, the handwriting changes. Once, he reads a line written in a style that isn't his. You've left before, but you forgot. He no longer knows how long he's been here. Each day feels twisted, warped around some unseen center. Once, he sees himself walking down the street, a double of him from far off. When he runs after it, the figure disappears into the bell tower. Simon still lives at the Loom Inn. The locals call him the newest one, though he no longer remembers arriving. And out on the highway, lost drivers sometimes speak of a strange turnoff that appears on rainy nights, leading to a town with no signal, no sound, and no way out. But only those who wish to forget something ever seem to find it. Welcome to the 8th dark and 10th story. The dead rise again. Dead things should stay dead. Lucas Moriarty, a 38-year-old forensic pathologist living in suburban Vermont, lost his only son, Elliot, in a car accident last winter. His wife, Claire, descended into deep depression. Lucas, meanwhile, couldn't sleep. Not from grief, but from guilt. He had been the one driving that night. Tormented, Lucas withdrew entirely into his basement laboratory, the same one where he'd once pursued side projects in neuroreactivation and post-mortem cellular study. The experiments he once deemed futile had now become his obsession. Claire didn't know. No one did, because Elliot's body had never truly been buried. Lucas had kept it, preserved in a cryogenic chamber at the back of the lab. For nearly a year, he tried everything: electric stimulation, synthetic plasma, even CRISPR techniques to wake dormant neural tissue. On the 358th winter night, since the accident, Lucas succeeded. Elliot's body convulsed under the surge of current. His chest contracted, then rose for the first time in almost a year. His eyes fluttered open, cloudy and pale like milk, but they moved. Lucas gasped, part horror, part awe. "Elliot, can you hear me?" The boy's lips parted, and a sound emerged. Not a child's voice, not even a human one. It was a sob stretched through a dream, foreign and aching. Lucas didn't tell Claire. Instead, he placed Elliot back in his old bed upstairs. He didn't speak, didn't eat, didn't sleep, but he lived. He just sat there, eyes following Lucas wherever he moved. Then Claire discovered him. She screamed upon seeing her son curled up on the bed, but instead of recoiling, she collapsed into his arms, weeping. "Lucas, what have you done?" "Oh God, how?" Lucas couldn't explain, but Claire didn't press. To her, the child's existence was a miracle. She accepted it. Then strange things began happening around the house. Each night, Claire dreamt of a man in a black robe standing at the foot of her bed, whispering, "You returned him, but the rest still belongs to us." Elliot began to draw, something he never did before. His drawings were twisted, dense, always of stone doors, eyeless creatures, and inverted silhouettes. He also scribbled cryptic lines in an unknown language. Lucas sent a sample to a linguist friend at Miskatonic University. The reply chilled him. "Lucas, this isn't language. These are memory chains, consciousness codes, a map of a non-human intelligence." Claire grew weaker, like her vitality was being drained. She sat with Elliot for hours, whispering unintelligibly. Lucas overheard once, and it made his skin crawl. "If we keep him, we must pay the price." A week later, Claire vanished. Police found nothing. All Lucas discovered was a slip of black ink paper under Elliot's pillow. "You thought you could take him back?" He was only on loan. From then on, Elliot stopped moving. He stood silently at the window, watching the backyard tree, whose roots seemed to be spreading unnaturally fast, creeping toward the house's foundation. One night, Lucas saw Elliot walk straight into the woods, dressed only in his old pajamas. He followed. Deep among the trees, Elliot stood before a freshly dug pit, exactly where Lucas had buried the empty coffin for the fake funeral. The child turned, and for the first time, spoke, not in Elliot's voice, but in Claire's. "You brought us home. Now it's your turn." Cold hands erupted from the ground and pulled Lucas into the soil. In his final moments, he saw another figure emerge from the woods, a copy of himself, smirking, holding Elliot's hand. By morning, the town saw Lucas Moriarty return to work. He smiled more, looked younger. Claire was spotted at the window in her old red dress, cradling her son. No one asked questions, because those who come back from the dead always act slightly different, and they never sleep. Welcome to the dark and tense secondary story, The Haunted Forest. If you see the moss growing upward, turn back. You're already too deep. Della, a botany student from Seattle, decided to go on a camping research trip in Oregon's Rookwood Forest with 3 friends, Harper, Eli, and Jonah. The forest was a forgotten swath of old growth, woods barely marked on any map. Locals rarely spoke of it, and when they did, they used only one name, the Loop. Della thought it was a joke, but the gas station owner near the forest entrance told them with a dry, expressionless face, that trail doesn't go anywhere, and it doesn't stop anywhere either. The first day went well. Della and her group pitched tents near a small stream, nestled among thick ferns and moss-covered roots. That night, they sat around the fire, telling ghost stories and laughing, unaware that every watch and phone had already begun to drift out of sync. The next morning, Eli discovered that his compass no longer worked. The needle spun aimlessly, as if disrupted by a magnet. Their GPS had no signal. Harper suggested turning back, but Della, the group's leader, assumed it was a temporary glitch. They followed a mossy trail leading north, but 2 hours later, they were back in the exact same spot, though no one had turned or changed direction. Did we walk in a circle? Jonah muttered. No, this isn't a circle. This moss, Della frowned. It's growing backward. Moss, which usually grew at the base of trees, was now sprouting downward from the tops, as if gravity had flipped. Some trees bore strange carvings like ancient symbols. Concentric circles repeated again and again. That night, they heard soft singing from the woods, a droning tune that made them sleepy and painfully homesick. Jonah claimed he saw a woman in a white dress standing behind a tree. Harper wouldn't stop scratching her wrist, where a spiral-shaped red mark had formed. Della woke in the middle of the night to find Eli standing still, staring into the deep woods, eyes wide and unblinking. Eli, I see the way out, he said. It's under the tree. By morning, Eli was gone. All that remained was a deep, damp hollow in a tree trunk. Inside were strands of human hair and bits of cloth. Harper was now in full panic. She tried to run south, the direction they had entered from, but 10 minutes later, she stumbled back into camp, her arms covered in cuts, like she clawed through brambles. I ran straight, but the trees, they repeat, like copy-paste. They realized they were trapped. The forest didn't follow normal spatial laws. Time had warped too. It was never fully light, and never entirely dark. Della found an old notebook hidden in a crevice of stone, seemingly left by someone who had been lost before them. The water-stained pages were scrawled in black ink. They are the forest. Not in the forest. They are the forest. If you hear the singing, don't respond. If you see the mossy path, don't walk it. If you see a version of yourself, it's already too late. On the 4th night, Harper vanished. Jonah, now clearly unhinged, muttered that the forest was copying them to keep them here. He said he'd seen Della walking through the woods, even though she was sitting right next to him. Della began to understand. The forest wasn't just holding them, it was replicating them. Every action, every thought replayed, like a degraded duplicate printed again and again over the same image. The next morning, Della woke alone. No Jonah, no tent. The clearing was bare, as if no one had ever camped there. She walked and walked endlessly, through an unchanging landscape. Trees with moss growing backward, soil soft like raw flesh, and that whispering song growing more and more like her own voice. Della. Eventually, she stopped. Ahead of her was a copy of herself, crouched among tree roots, gnawing on something that looked like a human hand. When the thing lifted its face, smiling with a mouth too wide, Della realized she had already died here, a very long time ago. She, or what remained of her, was just a copy, a living memory created by the forest to lure others in. The green path never ends, the copy said, because you never left. Welcome to the dark and tense secondary story, The Ghost on the Highway. There's no way out once you hit mile marker 132. Carter wasn't someone who was easily fooled. As a professional truck driver, he had driven through desolate, dark, and dangerous roads across America. But that night, on Highway 132, as he passed through a remote stretch of Wyoming, he felt something wasn't right. He had heard of Highway 132, the rumors, the stories from other truckers about rigs that vanished, or shadowy figures drifting through the darkness. Carter had always scoffed at those stories, just superstitious nonsense. But now, with his headlights slicing through the thick night ahead, he felt a strange anxiety he'd never experienced before. Carter drove through the night, accompanied only by the low rumble of the engine and the steady rhythm of tires on asphalt. Then, suddenly, he noticed a vehicle pulling alongside him from behind. Though he hadn't heard an engine, it was an old truck, battered like it had just survived a wreck. Its headlights blazed directly into Carter's cab. But when Carter checked his side mirror, he saw something that made his skin crawl. There was no driver. A chill ran down his spine. Cold sweat broke out across his neck. Carter hit the gas, but no matter how fast he drove, the truck remained right beside him. When he looked again, poof, it vanished. Carter exhaled, relieved, only for the truck to reappear directly in front of him a moment later, sitting in the middle of a winding curve, as if it had leapfrogged ahead. What the hell? Carter muttered. He told himself he was just tired, imagining things that weren't real. He kept driving, but the truck returned, stalking him silently, like a predator in the dark. Suddenly, up ahead, a blinking light appeared on the road. Carter slowed down to investigate. There, in the middle of the highway, stood a lone figure, a man wearing old clothes and a black hat. As Carter approached, the man didn't move. Carter leaned on the horn repeatedly, but the figure remained still. Carter's breathing grew shallow as he hit the brakes. The truck came to a halt, and then the man turned around and simply vanished into thin air. What the hell is going on? Carter shouted, slamming on the gas again. Now he could feel it. Highway 132 wasn't meant for ordinary people. There was something wrong in the air, as if time and space were folding in on themselves. With each mile, things got stranger. Road signs became unreadable. Milestones appeared in reverse, disorienting Carter. Even stranger, every single mile marker displayed the same number, 132. He didn't know how many dozens of miles he had driven, but every sign read the same, mile marker 132. Carter stopped in the middle of the road, heart racing. He swung the door open, stepping out to take deep breaths. Looking ahead, he saw a dark cloud, unnatural, not like any storm he'd seen. A cold mist rolled in from the distance, covering his truck and the entire road. And then, far ahead, another figure appeared. This time, it was a woman in a white dress, standing motionless in the middle of the highway, staring straight at Carter. There was no sound, only her lifeless gaze boring through him. Carter's skin crawled. He tried to drive past her, but as he neared, she didn't move. She was frozen, like a statue. Just then, a truck roared up behind him, its lights blinding, moving at an impossible speed. Carter swerved with everything he had, but the truck simply disappeared. Panicked, Carter jumped back into his rig and slammed the accelerator. But there was no road ahead anymore, only a swirling black vortex, sucking him into a place beyond comprehension, a world with no beginning and no end. As the windshield shattered and the light dimmed, Carter heard a soft voice, whispering from the darkness, "You've reached your destination." And with that, Highway 132 became an eternal road where lost souls roam, never to find their way back. Good night, everyone. Safe driving night, everyone.